So by this point, what you should now have is a knitted square, and on the needle you will have all of your live stitches, and what we need to do is cast these off so that they don't unravel and so that you can actually take your piece of knitting off the needle. So I'm going to show you how to do that now. You want to turn it round, and as if you were going to knit, you get your second needle. And what we're going to do is actually just knit the first 2 stitches. And then I'll show you what we do after that. So just knit the first 2 exactly as you have been so far. So we're going to knit 1, drop that off the needle. And I'm going to knit 2 and drop it off the needle. And now what we're going to do, it looks a little bit tricky, it looks a little bit fiddly. It is a little bit fiddly, but it's not actually difficult. We're going to insert the tip of our left needle from left to right of the second stitch from the tip of your needle. And I realise that sounds a bit like double Dutch, but I'm going to show you how to do it. So left needle goes into the second stitch from the tip of your needle, left to right, and then you're going to pass it over the tip of your right hand needle. If you just tug on that working yarn to hold that stitch on, and you just want to bring that first stitch through the loop, so you're essentially passing the second stitch over the first stitch on your right hand needle. So then you want to knit another stitch, because you always want to have 2 stitches on your right hand needle, and then insert the left needle again, left to right on that second stitch from the tip of your needle, and then we're going to pass it over that stitch again, bringing the first stitch up through the loop of the second stitch. So I hope that makes some sense. I'll show you again, and what you need to do is keep it very, very loose. Those 2 were actually very, very tight, so you want to keep this stitch really nice and loose because it'll make things easier. So left needle, left to right in the second stitch, and pass it over that first stitch on your right hand needle, and then knit 1 more stitch to make sure you always have those 2 stitches. Pass the second stitch over the first stitch and drop it off. So we've cast off quite a few stitches now, so if you just carry on in this way, I'll speed through this and I'll come back to you when we get back to the very last 2 stitches, because we're going to work those ever so slightly differently. So now I've got to the last 2 stitches, and what we're going to do with these 2 stitches, we're going to knit them together. We're going to do that because it creates a much neater, cleaner finish on your piece of work. If you don't do this, you'll end up with a strange sort of tag or ear on your knitted square, so it just keeps it nice and tidy. So the way to do this is you would go in as exactly as you would do to knit, but you're going to go into the second stitch from the tip of the needle, and you're going to go through both of those stitches. It can be quite tight depending on the size of the needles you're using, but it's definitely worth that bit of extra force to get through the stitches. So you want to go into the second one and go through both stitches, and then just knit them together as you normally would knit a single stitch. So you're just going to bring that loop through, and then you're going to drop both loops off of your left hand needle like so. So if you look, you can see that they're actually sort of gathered together now, and all that does, like I said, it just neatens things up, and then you just want to cast off that last stitch. What you're going to have now is your tail and of yarn and just 1 stitch left on the needle. So you can use your needle to pull that stitch out to make it nice and loose. And then what we want to do is trim the end of your yarn, and you're going to pull it through this. So you're going to trim this end and you're going to pull it through this loop here. I'm just going to snip this tail of yarn like so, and I am just going to pull it through the loop from the bottom like so and tighten that up, and as you can see you've got a nice neat finish on that now. So if you just look at the piece of knitting, you can see that we've got our garter stitch border going all the way around, and then the columns of stocking stitch, and what you will have is some tails of yarn in the corner like this, and what we're going to do in the next lesson is weave those tails in. There'll be one on both corners. We're going to weave those in, and then the piece is finished, it just needs blocking. So I will see you in the next lesson.